This is We the Sales Engineers podcast, show 204.
Welcome to We the SEs podcast, the show for sales engineers by sales engineers with your host, Ramsey Majaba.
What's up, SE Nation? Welcome back to another episode. In case you don't hear it in my voice, I'm a little bit under the weather, so I'm going to make this quick, but I still want to give our guest today his due because it was a great conversation. My guest, his name is Brent Keltner, and we had a great time talking about it. So he's an old school salesperson who has his own company. He does a lot of research, but he works a lot with sales. And I wanted to kind of chat and see what salespeople think about SEs, those who don't specifically work a lot with SEs or those who do, because he works with different types of companies that may or may not have SEs. He consults with them. So it was a great conversation with him, and it was a lot of great nuggets that at least I took. And I'd love to hear your thoughts about it. I don't want to spoil anything, so let's just jump into the show. Good morning, Brent. How you doing?
Morning, Ramsey. Doing well.
Awesome. I used to sound like a robot, it seems, but now we're talking clearly. I'm happy you're on the 27th. Are people working on the 27th these days?
This is a quiet week in the U.S. for sure. We're technically off, but I always, have work to do in the morning. So okay. It's a good time. First thing in the morning, head's still clear. So looking forward to the conversation.
You mentioned we. Can you introduce yourself, like who you personally are and who we could be?
Yeah, so I am the president of Winalytics, which is a go-to-market and revenue acceleration consultancy, author of a forthcoming book called The Revenue Acceleration Playbook, which is all about how to shift from product-driven selling to an authentic buyer journey. And it sets up the conversation. You were talking about the pre-call, the old world of selling versus the new world of selling. We're a boutique consulting firm. There's a half a dozen of us that are mostly folks with strong revenue leadership experience that lead engagements. And then we also have a content strategy team, because the new world of selling is all about, we think about selling around buyer empathy. What does your buyer care about the most? How do we anchor to that? Best way to do that, and this is something that technical salespeople often do better than salespeople, is anchor on your customer voice. What have the customers you've already sold told you about the value you provide? Make it easy for new buyers to understand that value prop, the value you've already delivered, people like them that you can help, advance what they're working on.
Okay. So I'm looking at your LinkedIn. You have a lot of experience in a lot of different things, from sales to being a CEO and all these different things. And recently, we've been talking a lot about empathy, like think about your customer, care about your customer. And then people talk about old school selling. I mean, wasn't that also part of old school selling at one point? Or what's the difference between how it was and how it is today and how it might be in the future?
Yeah, so there are three things that we point out that people think about the shift. In the old world, the buyer needed you to find out about your product, honestly, right? In the new world, the buyers are overwhelmed with information about you and your product. They can go to peer review sites, websites. They don't want you to talk about your product. They want you to talk about how your product helps them. How does your product unlock value for them? What pain or problem does it solve for, right? People are really busy and they want to understand quickly how your product adds value. That's number one.
Okay.
Number two is often in the old world of selling, the trust was based on my experience as a company. My experience as an individual, right? You trusted me. The new world of selling, it's really all about being a buyer problem solver, right? It's about hearing the problems they're working on, what the win in it for them is, and how do I make a match? How do I match my product to the problem they're working on? So I have to listen and understand in a very different way. It can't be a one-way, here's what I'm working, here's what we do, here's why it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. It has to be more, tell me, what are the problems you're working on? Here are a range of problems that we as a company solve with people like you. I may introduce it that way. Here's a menu of things we work on. What are you working on? And what specifically is keeping you from getting there? So I can think about what are the capabilities of my product that might unlock a gap for you and help you be more successful. And then messaging that back.
And so if I understand correctly, back in the old days, it was a relationship-based experience. The customer trusted the salesperson, and the salesperson was able to talk about the product specifically. Now, like in the high-tech world, we have so many different products, doing so many different things, even within the same company. And I've seen SEs become salespeople within their organization. They know the product and they're the best salespeople out there because they can do consulting. But then they move because their quota got increased exponentially, and it's basically a pay cut. So they move to another company, and now they don't have the same technical experience with the products or solutions and all that. How can a salesperson talk about technology while they're not experts in it?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And if you think about what a good salesperson does in a highly technical solution is acts as a guide, right? They're trying to build a match between the buyer and the technical salesperson that can actually architect the solution. But to use the technical salesperson's time well, they can't just say, hey, he or she's interested in our product. They gotta say, right, it's probably, I've done discovery on these kind of technical gaps they have towards this problem. Right. So take an example of a company that we did a revenue leader interview with, planet.com, which has like 400 satellites in the atmosphere, and they do all kinds of biometric monitoring on temperature and weather patterns, right, to help manage forestation or emergency response or agribusiness yields. The salesperson that a company's trying to solve, and what kind of data don't they have currently?
Sorry,
where's the gap in their knowledge and information?
I lost you for a second earlier after forestry and agriculture.
Yeah, agricultural yield. So I was just saying that the salesperson's got to get somebody to, okay, what are you trying to accomplish around your agricultural business and yields? What are your current data gaps, right? What are you not getting about the environmental data, weather patterns, or whatever? If you can help me understand that, then I can get a technical engineer to talk about what additional data, how that would map to your system. So what the salesperson has to be good at is good discovery and guiding the buyer towards the parts of the product that are most likely to solve their problem. The technical engineer, ultimately, as you say, they're the ones who can talk specifically to how does that problem technically solve the problem? What data does it bring? What kind of processes does it bring, et cetera?
Okay, so there's two things that I see. A lot of times salespeople don't know the solution enough to be able to guide people, just mainly because, as I mentioned earlier, they move companies often because their quotas get higher and higher. And if they're spending time learning the product, they're not spending time selling. And I'm seeing a shift in sales engineering to being that consultant guide, where the salesperson is basically doing the introduction, they're managing the project, managing the sales cycle in general. But the sales engineer is coming in and talking about, like, what are the problems you're facing, doing the discovery. And it depends on the company, obviously. Have you seen anything like that with your current customers or work that you're doing?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, as products get more and more complex, and as you say, there's a lot of competitive products, then you have a buyer who's better educated, right? They're better educated about the range of possibilities, no question about it. I mean, one of the techniques we teach is called gap questioning.
Okay.
And really the idea is that around any buyer goal, there are probably 3 or 4 technical gaps they have.
Right.
And so what the salesperson learning those questions is enough often to guide the buyer.
And where would they get these questions from? Is it like the company or the sales engineer, or?
I mean, ideally you have a sales enablement team, right? Or you have, sales consultants like us that would come up with that. But often good salespeople come up with their own gap questions because they realize where the energy in the conversation is. So let's take another company, Aginity, which has I'm going to say this wrong, but they have a SQL data analytics platform, right? So rather than it's a cloud base, so now you can have decentralized analytics, but then is shared across support. So gap questions for them would be just simple things like, do you have a library of repurposable code, right, where somebody can work from the best practice code that already exists so they can save time and money? Do you have version control on that code? Can you set permissions in terms of who has access to that? Are you able to combine data sets, right? So you can take different parts of the organization to have more integrated visibility around logistics metrics or retail KPIs or things like that. So they just have a series of gap questions that are going to point to capabilities in the platform to see how people respond. And what you have to train your salespeople is, don't get sucked into going deep on the product because you're going to get burned, right, when they start to ask you. So basically what you're looking for is, in this case, a business goal. Are you trying to make your SQL engineers more productive? Are you trying to have better business insight and visibility? Are you trying to reduce IT lift in terms of deploying analytics platforms? So tell me what you're working on. And now tell me a couple of things that are keeping you from that productivity, right? You have to rewrite the code every time. You can't share it. You can't share it across teams. Okay, great. Now I think we're at a point where it probably would make sense to bring on a technical engineer, talk through how we could configure a solution to meet those problems.
So basically, if I understand correctly, what the salesperson is trying to do is generate enough interest and gather basic information to move the sales cycle forward, to bring in that technical resource. Why wouldn't the technical resource be already there with the salesperson? Because as I mentioned earlier, the sales engineer is no longer just the person who configures stuff. They are the people who are discussing the business value. Because the best technology in the world, if it doesn't solve a business problem, it's useless, right?
Two reasons. There are many technologies that if you don't have a high enough price point to justify having 2 people on the first calls, right, where you're really qualifying whether there's an opportunity. So that's one. But the second one is, it's actually a good sales strategy is to hold things in reserve, right? So I make my buyer commit to giving a certain amount of information, sharing a certain amount about what they're working on. And now my sales engineer becomes a coveted resource to help further tailor the conversation.
So, okay, that makes perfect sense. Some of the challenges that I see a lot of salespeople have is that they want to speed up the sales cycle, but also the customer, they want information now. I mean, they already did the research, they looked through it, and now they just want to see the damn product. How do salespeople have the skills, or what are the techniques that they can have to hold something in reserve and not just give everything to the customer, whether it's correctly or incorrectly?
Yeah, the simplest one that we always say, because people show up and the buyer's like, show me a demo, show me a demo, show me a demo, right? And what we always encourage people to say, just simply like, look, there are all kinds of things my sales engineer could show you on a demo, and it'll probably put you to sleep. So tell me what you're really trying to solve, and then we can have a really tight targeted demo tomorrow if you want. right? So the point is like, I'm not, look, what you're saying and you can say it literally if you want to, sellers, look, we're not going to show up and just throw up our product to you. That would be a waste of your time. That would be a waste of our time. So let's just spend a little bit of time figuring out what you're really trying to solve. And then we can have a really targeted conversation, seeing if we can solve that problem.
Okay. That makes perfect sense to me. Yeah. Like, I feel like I'm asking you all these questions because I've run into this.
No, this is great.
Where we do that. My salesperson does the discovery, and they bring me in. I show up to the meeting room, and everything is incorrect. I have to.
Well, then you have bad salespeople.
Well, yeah. Sometimes you have bad salespeople. Sometimes the technology is just too complicated, and they didn't ask the right questions. There could be a million reasons for it. Mine specifically was a bad salesperson. That's a different story. How do, like, as sales engineers, when we come in and do a demo and the information that was provided was incorrect, I mean, have you seen, I'm pretty sure your SEs never saw that, but have you seen other salespeople go into the same situation, run into the same situation?
Look, of course, because as you go through the sales process, we know priorities change, right? Other things come up and they suddenly, boom, they're over in that direction. And I guess the discipline that we teach, and this is true for SEs as well, is you always got to go back to what your buyer's trying to solve. Without going back to what your buyer's trying to solve, you're totally lost. And SEs can have that skill. Look, SEs are often really good at questions, right? That's what they do.
Yeah.
And they're really good at being consultative, and that's why they build a ton of trust. What I see with SEs often is they're not situationally fluent as they should be, right? They get locked into one thing.
Yeah.
As opposed to just pivoting to, like, well, that the product solves three major problems. So SEs should feel empowered to kind of think about that next problem if we're hitting a roadblock on one. So let me give you another example. We did work with a company called Guild Education, which basically is a marketplace for degrees. They work with a bunch of universities to then tailor corporate programs, training programs, bringing degrees, and they provide a lot of guidance on the career pathways. And so it's a great tool for recruiting, promotion, retention, right? Skill attainment. When the work I did with them was about exactly this sales to technical sales handoff. Just listen to a bunch of gong calls, and what you found was a brilliant technical sales force that the first thing they heard from the buyer of area of interest, they would just go into it wasn't product pitching. It was a new term that came to me, insight pitching. They would pitch, hey, we've done this with this company. Hey, have you read this study? Hey, they wouldn't stop and just ask a friggin' question.
Yeah, I've actually seen that quite a bit from sales engineers, where they get excited about the solution. They start solving the problem before they actually confirm that it is the problem that the customer is trying to solve, which is what you mentioned. Like, go back to what problems the customers are trying to solve, which is interesting. What else have you seen SEs? Let's not call it mistakes. What other things that SEs need to work on to improve?
Yeah, before I have another couple that are, I think, great ones, but let's just focus on this concept that SEs, as much as salespeople, as much as customer success people, need to think about the buyer success statement. The buyer success statement is the buyer saying in their own words what would make them successful. Until you have a buyer success statement, you do not have a sales opportunity. Exclamation point. Yeah,
no, that's the quote that I'm going to go with for this call. Okay.
It's true. So if you are an SE and you feel that energy, I think there's something there, right? I'm really excited to share. We saw that problem. Just got to develop the muscle to stop and ask a question. Did I hear this correctly? Is this what you're trying to solve? Is this what would make you more successful? And get them to confirm, because until they've confirmed, to your point, you could be answering the wrong problem.
So, yeah, we talk about objection handling. There's a gentleman by the name of Doug Brown who wrote a book about, like, win-win selling, how to do objection handling. And the first thing he says, if a customer objects to something, take a breath. and try to dig in and understand why. And it's the same thing when the customer
Yep.
gives you a tidbit of information. Take a breath. Maybe it's a red herring and you're going down the wrong rabbit hole. Maybe you heard someone say something at some point and they just mentioned it and they think that's the solution versus the actual solution. What is the role of the salesperson in all of this? If you see an SE just hitting the gas pedal and going, and
It's both. I mean, it's a great instinct, Ramsey, is we talk about in our book, we talk about the pullback to product pitching is incredibly strong for everybody throughout the sales process, because our product is familiar, right?
Yeah.
And it's easy to talk about. When we're fluidly talking about your buyer success statement, that's a little scary, right? Because could go a bunch of different directions. So the product is familiar. And the second thing is customers ask for product information all the time. Often they need help being guided to their success statement. It's really easy for them to say, hey, show a demo. Hey, click on that, click on that. Pullback to product pitching is really strong, which is why everybody has to reinforce, hey, have we gotten to that buyer on both sides? Have we gotten to that buyer success statement? Do we know what we're solving for? And honestly, you do a call, every call, you got to restart it with, hey, today, I think we've had 2 calls, stakeholder meeting, first slide, discovery to date. I think this is what we're solving for. This is what we've heard from Joe and Sally. Does everybody on this call agree that our demo today is focused on those problems? This is what we're working on. Always come back to that buyer in the proposal. Always come back to that buyer success statement and confirm it.
So how do you get to the buyer success statement? Because my experience that if I'm talking to a user, their success statement is very different from a VP, for example. How do you get them and how do you
it's an excellent point and something we point out in our book. Our basic, the beginning of any one of our consulting engagements starts with building value plays, right? Things like, does your product help with increased revenue or increase operational efficiency or change a user experience, or like Agility, change the time to business insights? The reason to start with that is you can get buyer personas lined up on a value play and people have a different perspective, right? For Agility, time to business insights, the analytics manager, it's about, hey, my people are more productive and happy. But the chief data officer is probably thinking about, hey, I can get to my KPIs quicker and I trust them more. So a buyer success statement, you can have versions of that for different buyer personas. And it's a great insight, right? But at the end of the day, they have to line up. Those success statements have to line up, but you have to be able to actually speak in a stakeholder call. So I understand we're working on, it's a SQL analytics platform. We want to get your team collaborating more. And I understand, John, for you, really that's about your team's productivity, not having to rewrite code. But I understand for you, Mr. or Mrs. Chief Data Officer, that flows through to now you can actually you trust your data.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing. Like the user pain, I guess, or success statement has to have a positive effect. If we solve that, it has to have a positive effect on the CEO or CFO or VP or whatever is
economic buyer, right?
Yeah.
The decision maker. Yep.
So, but if you solve the user's problem and it does nothing for the director or the one up, the one right up there, it might not lead to a sale because
it might not lead to a sale, and that could be a positioning problem, could be a product problem. Honestly, is like,
yeah,
if that's true, you got to be priced at a level where the user can sign off, or there's a discretionary budget. And some softwares are that way. There's a freemium model to prove it, and then you escalate up. But what you said is exactly right. This is the new world of selling. Is we have to connect our different buyers' value props. We can't rely on them doing it for themselves. So we have to help our user understand how he can become a hero to his boss or to his boss's boss. And so back to your original question, how do we get that buyer success statement? I mean, you can use gap questions, but general questions that we always encourage people to say, okay, we think about impact questions that lead to a success statement. generally could be things like, all right, so it sounds like, if we, put this analytics platform in place, it would solve that problem of now you could collaborate on code. Just curious, if we're able to work on that together, what would be the biggest win for you? What would be the biggest win for your boss? How could I make you a hero?
Yeah.
What would be your touchdown dance? I've heard a couple of companies, like if we were working together and in 6 months, we were working together, what would be the touchdown dance for you? What would get you dancing to the end zone? Another top seller, I've worked with her across a number of companies, says, if I could wave a magic wand and you had this product in 6 or 12 months, what would you want to see happen?
Yeah. I generally like to ask, like, if we ever run this, if you ever end up using this solution, how do you see this making, like, how do you see yourself using it, and how would it make your life better or worse? And
love it.
Yeah.
So yours is a life better or worse question. Yeah. I mean, really, so a buyer success statement comes out of helping them envision a different and a better future.
Yeah. The reason I go with the worst part as well is just because I want to, like, find out any objections that they might have down the road.
Yeah. I like it.
So I don't get smacked in the face later on. It's like, well, I thought we closed the deal. What are you doing? We're going backwards.
Yeah, I'm going to write that question down.
Oh, all right, cool.
As an impact question, and I'll credit you the first couple of times, and then I'll forget. It'll just come into the blur.
Whatever works.
So you had asked about the other two things that we see where technical salespeople, I think, can improve what they do. Is one is being a collaborator on what we call a path to partnership. Other people call it a mutual close plan or a work back plan. And it really is this idea of, once we have agreement on that, we may want to work together, and we're pre-proposal, is literally putting on one slide, what are the steps we have to get to close, right? Who are the folks that have to sign off? What is your legal and procurement process going to be? What's the IT review going to be? And another critical one that I think often gets forgotten by sales engineers is, if we're going to do a proof of concept, what would success be in that proof of concept? How would we know we're successful? So we're basically building together agreement at a mid-stage around a proposal, how we get to a successful close. And often the technical salespeople know what those steps are. What do I have to prove to IT? What do I have to prove in a proof of concept better than the salespeople? And so just being clear that interest is not a closed deal, we have to often educate our buyers on how to buy. Yeah.
We have a couple of episodes specifically about proof of concept and proof of value, or whatever you want to call them. And like, proof of value is where deals go to die, generally speaking, and how to make sure that it doesn't happen. But I want to add to your second statement, which is SEs need to work with the customers on, like, the success plan and or with the proposal. I feel like SEs don't work with their salespeople enough. SEs are not in the proposal meeting, generally speaking. Sometimes they are, sometimes they aren't. But the salespeople have to know exactly why we're proposing every single item, and not just to be able to defend it, to be able to show it in a positive light. Like, we're offering this because it will solve X. Not we're offering this because the sales engineer said, oh, add it to the bill of material. Right? And that's, I see sometimes, like, SEs and salespeople, the great ones work very well together. The sales teams, the okay ones or not so great, they just, here's the bill of materials. And then if a salesperson is savvy enough, they go back and ask the SE a million questions so that they can gather this information. But if the SE provides that information to begin with, that salesperson might have a million other questions, but at least they're digging deeper. And so,
no, it's a great point. I mean, and we talk about this buyer success statement we talked about earlier is, look, you verbally recap it in your first call. You put it in an email before your second call. With a group, you put it in a slide. And honestly, it's what your proposal should lead with. Is, to your point, is like, hey, let me just confirm that this is what we're trying to accomplish for you, because now the capabilities list that you're going to provide, it's all mapped to that, always coming back to that language of this is an investment in something you've told me you care about.
And like I like to do that when I send a follow-up email to the customer after the first meeting or whatever meeting. And I like to put it in words that they can immediately either copy and paste or forward that email straight to their boss or their boss's boss, so they don't have to translate anything. And I see a lot of issues where SEs go so technical in that follow-up, and that when the person sells it to the boss, and the boss is like, I don't know what that means. And so, which kind of holding back, right? You mentioned about holding back. Hold back in a way that it's easily shareable and people understand why you're there. And then the higher ups who want to come to the next meeting.
Yeah, love it. I mean, the whole beauty of putting what, as you said, a buyer success statement on the follow-up email is that it's going to be forwarded. The boss isn't going to read the deck. He may not come to the next call, but he can understand a quick 2 sentences on what problem they're going to solve for us. Yeah, it's awesome.
Yeah, it makes it like, even if they don't forward it, and the boss says to the individual, like, why are you even talking to them? They can simply regurgitate those 2 lines. We're talking to them because we're trying to solve this, and they're going to help us do it like by doing this.
Exactly.
And it's like, all right, let's meet them next time. It may not work all the time, but it's a better chance of working.
Exactly. Let me ask you another one that this may be covered in other episodes, but one of the other ways we think SEs can help a lot is we talk about it as a sales to success plan. You know, often in a complex sale, there might be multiple things we could solve for the buyer. We don't necessarily want to try and solve all of those, because it can lead to deal stalls, right? As they're trying to figure out what's going on. So, you know, we know a key part of closing is what's the thing we can take off the table right now.
Yeah.
The challenge is often what doesn't get documented is the other 2 or 3 things that they talked about that we're not closing on. And so we always say, look, and there are more and more companies. I think of HubSpot. There's a great story in our book about HubSpot. I think about also a company called Zeal at Work that is a B2B. It's a B2C company, but they do B2B kind of health related offerings around massage and acupuncture, et cetera. Both companies changed their incentive comp, so salespeople were incented to do broad discovery, identify a bunch of goal areas. Even if they only closed on one, they got compensated in the next 12 months of other things that closed.
Okay.
And sales engineers can often be really helpful at just in those final calls. This is what we're trying to close on, but here are some other things I heard that can be solved. So we think of just creating a sales and success notes document. You know, it could be at Google, can be in your CRM and Salesforce or whatever, but here's phase 1 goals. Here are phase 2 goals that when we do that quarterly QBR, let's come back to those goals to see if it's time to start thinking about those or working on them.
So, well, the way I do it is I have an Excel spreadsheet. So I have the same customers over and over. I'm not out there right now. Part of my job might have changed and I need to find new logos, but initially I have the same set of customers, and I have an Excel spreadsheet with a list of all my customers, their tree, and who reports to who. And whenever I meet with them, if someone says something that's interesting that I might be able to help in the future, or it's not the right time to focus on right now, there is a note right there. And then there's a note in my calendar to follow up on that topic or whatever. So yeah, SEs, they have not just through a discovery call, water cooler talk. You show up and you start helping the customers and they tell you like, oh, I know we're working on this, but this area sucks. Like, all right, let me put it in my notes. The big problem that I see is they forget to tell the salespeople sometimes, or they tell the
success people, right?
Yeah. So other companies have customer success teams that need to be doing that, but sometimes the information is relayed and then nothing is done with it.
And so this is what we say, taking your Excel sheet example is, I don't know how you guys at your company, come back to, the buyer goals. And so, a lot of times we do a lot of implementation and training using the product,
Yep.
but then some type of, every 3 months, every 4 months, could be every 6 months, a quarterly business review. Some people call it an executive business review, where you're coming back to the goals for the partnership.
Yep.
That's where everybody needs to have access to the same notes document. So we show up to the call saying, hey, I know today we're working on this one, number one, but we talked about 2, 3, 4. Just want to stay aware of those to know we can come back to them.
Yep.
Or another example, a company we worked with at called Burning Glass Technology, labor market technology. We were working with a higher education division. There's 5 different offices they could sell it into. So one of the CSMs would just start he started doing this as we started working together. He would just start his first call with, remember, we're working on graduate enrollments today. But remember, there are 4 other things that we talk about. And as you look at the platform, I want you to think about, are there others at your company that might benefit? Then he'd do a typical implementation, the rest of the call. At the end, he'd come back to that slide, and invariably 40% of the time, he'd get an internal referral.
Yeah. I pretty much agree with everything you said. The hard thing that I see is if the SE and the salespeople are not tied one-to-one, things get lost in the shuffle. Because if my salespeople have a different goal than I do, let's say my customer is A, they have 17 other customers. Sometimes our goals are not aligned. My goal is to have customer A be the most important thing in my life. Their goal is to have all their customers, or whoever pays the most helps them achieve their quota. So I think we mentioned earlier about like how salespeople are incentivized and now SEs are incentivized. That kind of, if they're not meshed, if they're not on the same target, or if their goals are totally different, it might not work.
No, 100% it might not work. And so I think the minimal approach is just as you think about your Excel document. If you're the only one involved in the quarterly reviews with the customer, then your Excel document is fine.
Yeah.
But if there are other people that are involved in the implementation and quarterly review, then you just need some simple way to share and capture, right? Because other people are capturing other pain or goal areas. It's just a discipline of, we got to agree, whoever's working on an ongoing basis with the customer, we have to agree to capture current and potential goal areas.
Yeah. And so I work with a few other people that I've shared the document with. Because of different goals, not many people look at it. So in the end, it's mine. Right?
Got it.
And I'm the one following up. I'm the one doing all these things just because they're my customer. I care about them the most. But other people have other priorities. But yeah, I guess that's something for me to think about, and how I can help them see that we have similar goals and whatnot. But that's a topic of discussion that I'm gonna really need to. Oh man, you're making me think today. All right, okay. The goal wasn't for me to think today. There's just to be clear. Right. So,
my goal is always to have people think and be more intentional in their work.
All right, it is time to move on to the not so fire round. These are the same 4 questions I ask pretty much every guest since the start of the show, which is 201 episodes ago, pretty much. And you can take your time answering, or you can answer them pretty quickly. But the question number 1 is, what do you love about what you're doing today in terms of helping other organizations get better as salespeople, or get better as sales organizations?
What I love about it is just helping people be authentic. Be authentic and honestly focus on truth.
Do you find? Go ahead, finish your thought.
I mean, it sounds like a strange thing to say, but to go back to the old world in selling, which is about me and my product and my process, the new world of selling is about my buyer and buyer problem solving and a reciprocal process. And good salespeople in this world, I'm not trying to pull anything over on anybody. I'm looking to see if there's a fit. Can I help you advance a goal? And if you spend time on the buyers where you can advance a goal, and come to the right solution, it just works better for everybody.
I can tell you this. 10 years ago, I was trying to buy my first property. And I went with the mortgage person who spent the most amount of time just answering my questions. Not because they had a better product or anything like that, just because he made it his mission to make sure I understand everything that I'm signing versus some other people who just gave me a document and said, sign here. So, yeah. And that's from a personal level, I'm sure. In the end, when we're working with organizations, we're working with people.
Yeah, 100%. But also, I mean, he's demonstrating an interest in you.
Yeah.
Right. He's not demonstrating, demonstrating an interest in your problem, which is to sign up for buy a place.
Yeah.
And mitigate your risk.
I think the line that got me, and I don't know if it's a line or he actually says it, but he said, I'm not leaving here until you understand everything that we're looking at, and I've answered all your questions. It's like, all right, you got me hook, line, and sinker right there. And I was young, so maybe I wasn't as experienced. I wasn't in sales, so I didn't know I thought he was a nice person, and he was. But yeah, do you find that salespeople may not be authentic? Is that why your goal is to make sure everybody's authentic?
Yeah. Look, I think we're I've been doing this honestly, and we didn't talk about my background, but I was trained as an academic, right? And found my way into revenue leadership and had a lot of success with that. And we're having a lot of success with this method as a consultant. We're in the second or third inning of this. Most people pitch their product and they want to close customers. And we have a method that's proven again and again and again that you actually do better and you like your job more. So anchoring on your buyer success statement, let's just make it that simple. Like coming back to this guy, he asked you a lot of questions. He was demonstrating trust with like, what are you trying to accomplish in this? I want to understand what you're worried about. In this case, your risk aversion, not the upside. So anchoring on what your buyer cares about the most, you will sell more quicker, and you will like your work more because you're not trying to force people to do anything, right? You're just looking for people that are a match. Right. So I want more people to sell in an authentic way, have authentic conversations where there's not a fit, you move on. No harm, no foul, right? But if we focus on our buyer and solving our buyer's problems and agreeing to a reciprocal process, I do stuff, I give you stuff, and then I expect stuff in return, because you have to have Mr. or Mrs. Buyer. You actually have to build organizational readiness to buy. I can't close anything, right? I can't close anything without you doing stuff. So I want more people to sell that way because you're going to be more successful. You're going to like your work more. And honestly, in this world, the best sellers are just learning about their buyers constantly.
Right. Okay.
And so I am, to our earlier conversation, if there's anything that just bugs me, it's just people accepting mediocrity. And there's a lot of mediocrity in selling, right? It's just like, oh, well, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing, even if there's a better outcome. So yeah, I'm going to keep pushing. A lot of people don't like the message, but I'm going to keep pushing.
Well, that leads me to the second question, which you may have already answered. I'll ask it again. Maybe you have a different way of saying it or a different answer. What would you change about currently how sales is done?
Yeah, I think the one thing is what we said before, always focus on your buyer success statement.
Okay.
Always focus on hearing from your buyer how working with you and your company would make them more successful. As you say, how would it make their life better? Or what are their fears about how it could make it worse? How would it get them dancing in the end zone? What is their success statement? Because again, until you have a buyer success statement, you do not have a sales opportunity.
Okay.
We see salespeople spin their wheels all the time in a hopeful way on deals that have no chance of ever closing because your buyer is not really bought in. They don't have a vision for how it's going to help them.
Yeah.
And so they muddle through, spend a lot of time moving, sending proposals, and then guess what? They got crap in their pipeline.
Okay. All right. So the third question is about a book or resource. You mentioned that you've written a book. Can you share what the title of that book is and where people can find it?
Yeah, it's called the Revenue Acceleration Playbook. And you can find it on Amazon. It's ready for pre-order, comes out in April.
Okay.
But if you want to, you can today go to our book website, authenticitywins.com. And you can download the foreword and first chapter.
Okay.
The foreword is by David Meerman Scott, a well-known marketing and growth strategist. The first chapter is really about how I, as an academic, created the authentic buyer journey. And I tell a story about buying a condo in Boston between the traditional realtor who just pitched features of different condos at me.
Yep.
And the second realtor who really was interested in understanding, hey, what's your best living situation? And that was her question. She asked me a lot of questions about, are we on track for your best living? And that's who I went with. And she made a hefty commission. I got a great condo.
Speaking of, like, we were going look at houses and we walked into this house and there's this big wall in the middle of the room. And like the first thing you see and we're like, why is that wall there? It doesn't make sense. And my realtor didn't say anything. He just let us walk around. And then he started talking to my wife and my wife said, like, that wall's just nuts. It doesn't make sense. And he's like, yeah, that's just the way the house is. We can go look at the next house. And as we were walking out, another realtor with another person came in to see the house. Oh, look at that wall. It's so amazing right there in the middle of the room. And like, you can tell one is being like, being advisory, helping, authentic. The other one's just trying to sell. And we just all laughed and walked away. But yeah, that's a good point. All right. Is there another book or resource you would recommend for sales engineers who want to transition into sales?
Oh man. Yeah, Spin Selling.
Yep.
You know Neil Rackham's book, Spin Selling?
Yep. Got it.
So guy's a genius. I was trained as a social scientist, so to appreciate that with social science, he actually, what he showed is that, sales momentum comes from asking a lot of questions and guiding the buyer with questions. And so it's a method I think a lot of sales engineers would benefit from.
I know I have. So Spin Selling and Solution Selling are the two books that I read first about sales that helped me as a sales engineer. So yeah, I agree about Spin Selling. All right, last question of the not so fire round. Is there a habit you're working on today to improve, whether it's in your personal or professional life?
I'll give you two. One is people sometimes I turn gray prematurely, and my younger brother used to say it's because you burn white hot. Bad temper. So and not so much anymore, but I still all the time catch myself, just like, no, pause 5 seconds. Just count to 5 before you respond, or wait a day before responding to that email. So I've learned a lot of ways to just not get irritated or annoyed by stuff day to day.
That's a good one to work on. So that's great. All right.
But
so
the other one I'll say, and I just got to give a shout out for anybody who does martial arts. I do martial arts with my kids and have done my first degree black belt. My kids are both junior black belts. One of the things my daughter just tested for her second degree junior black belt, she had to write an essay. And the one thing she focused on was this idea of mind on the mat.
Okay.
Be present where you are. We in our dojo all the time, mind on the mat. When you do your kata, when you do your supplementary exercise, you have to be present with where you are. And she talked about it as a 12-year-old, how it helped her to manage anxiety. And so this principle of mind on the mat, being present where you are, not thinking about the other 1,000 things I got to do, I have found that karate training made me a lot more productive.
Your 12-year-old daughter wrote about mind on the mat.
My 12-year-old daughter wrote about mind on the mat, how having to do, she learned it with her kata. You had to be present. Otherwise you messed up your kata. Yeah. Focus your energy. And, she's getting to be a teenager. And so the pressures of that, and it was just fascinating to see her translate that into school pressures.
Nice.
So that was a powerful moment for me, that anybody can benefit from this discipline, cultivated through martial arts, meditation, whatever. Mind on the mat, be present where you are.
Yeah, it's amazing. All right, Brent, last question of the day. If people want to reach out and connect with you, where can they do that?
Yeah, they can just send me an email at bkeltner, BKELTNER, at Winalytics.com. That's WINALYTICS.com.
I'll put the link to Winalytics in the show notes as well, so people will have access to you if they so choose. Thank you so much for your time, Brent. And I really enjoyed
Ramsey, I really enjoyed the call. Really enjoyed about your own practice and making some suggestions for all of us, right? We can all get better every day.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming on, Brent. It was a pleasure talking to you. And thank you for listening. I'd love to hear your thoughts about any nuggets that you took from this conversation. What are your thoughts? Anything you would do differently based on the conversation? What would you keep? What would you do differently? What would you stop? So let me know. And I'm just going to go drink some tea right now. So I'll see you later. Peace. No, sorry. That's the YouTube videos. I have YouTube videos, by the way, if you haven't seen them. But for the podcast, I usually say, this is Ramsey signing off.